But first, this whole election cycle, Democrats have been telling America and the world that decency is on the ballot, that they are the normal ones, the people of joy. And they've also been saying that Republicans are, in a word, well, weird. But, they say that every accusation is an admission, and I think we may have another case of that phenomenon right here. Because we need to take a good, hard look at potential first fella Doug Emhoff, seen here in happier times with his wife Kamala Harris. Well, it turns out that he may not always be such a happy chappy. And I have to warn you, some of what I'm about to share is a bit disturbing. Because according to allegations made in a well-sourced article in the Daily Mail, back in 2012, Emhoff was at the glitzy Cannes Film Festival in France with his then-girlfriend. And according to the story, while waiting in a valet queue, Emhoff, according to the woman involved and other witnesses, thought that his girlfriend, was flirting with another man. And in response, the article claims that he smacked her so forcefully that she spun around in front of a crowd of people. Charming, not. Now, this story is really important, I think, for a number of reasons. Number one, the allegations are terrible, and I have to say that a representative of Emhoff has denied them. But even so, seriously, do Americans want someone who is under a cloud for this sort of thing representing them, as first spouses so often do as a nation? I don't think so. And, there's more to this, too. You see, Emhoff has been held up by the media as a sort of new type of man, a male feminist, modern, supportive, willing to take a step back while his mate pursues her career, possibly all the way to the White House. Though, as I always say, anyone who calls himself a male feminist ought to be on a watch list. Here's Emhoff in 2023 talking to MSNBC's Jonathan Cape about how much we need to do something about toxic masculinity.
Masculinity for a moment. Has being second gentleman changed your own view of perceived gender roles or what it means to be a man?
This is something I've thought about a lot and something I've spoken about a lot. There's too much of toxicity. It's masculine toxicity out there, and we've kind of confused what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, where you've got this trope out there that you've got to be tough and angry and lash out to be strong. It's just the opposite.
Is he for real there? Now, here's Emhoff this year having a nice little sit-down with former White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki. I mean, what a nice guy he is.
Important part, or an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny, I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this.
Well, I guess one thing is true here when he said he's always been like this, because, of course, this is the same Emhoff who, back in 2009, when his kids were little, impregnated the nanny and then somehow, according to reports, led her to miscarry. What an absolute catch. Male feminist through and through. No toxic masculinity there. And I hate to play the partisan game, but can you imagine how this sort of story would be on the front pages for the next 4 weeks if a Republican were involved? Remember, the allegations against Emhoff, which have been corroborated by multiple witnesses, though which he denies, are far more credible and far more sourced than the allegations against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, which were not sourced, not corroborated, and in at least one case later retracted because the accuser admitted they wanted to cause trouble for Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. To show you just how ridiculous this all is, Instead of looking at credible allegations the potential next first gentleman assaulted his date, Politico.com has weighed in on a much more important issue when it comes to women. Not domestic abuse, but facial hair. I'm not kidding. Specifically, J.D. Vance's beard, which they say, quote, is a sign of toxic masculinity, unquote. You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, remember, the Democrats are the good guys. Decency is on the ballot and all of that. Which brings us now then to Weird Tim Walz, who once again revealed this week that he has a wee little problem with this thing called the truth. At this week's vice presidential debate, one of the few tough questions that went to Walz was about revelations that he had claimed to have been in Hong Kong when China crushed the Tiananmen Square student rebellion in 1989. It turned out he wasn't there at all. And have a look at how this went down.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance. I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times.
Anyway, Walz wants to play it off, but I think it is kind of a big deal. I mean, it's sort of like saying, hey, I was in New York in 2001 and claiming that I was there for 9/11 or something. So why does Tim Walz lie? Remember, there have been so many of these, yes, weird, because there's no other word for it, exaggerations or truth stretchings. I mean, the whole thing about claiming that he retired from the National Guard as a command sergeant major when he hasn't completed the course for the promotion. The very close to the line statements that were definitely designed to give the impression that he saw combat during the Gulf War. Remember him saying, I carried weapons of war in war? When in fact, he scarpered from the Army before his unit was deployed overseas. And then there was the claim that he made back in 2022, before he even made the national stage, that kids in his state of Minnesota only missed 10 days of school because of his draconian COVID lockdowns. Not true. But hey, this is what the Democrats want you to think. It's, in fact, the Republicans who are the liars, the misogynists, and the weirdos. Okay.